Hey y'all. It's been a minute. It's Whitney. I am happy to pop in, join you for a off-season crossover episode. This one was an episode that I recorded last month in November, just before the United States presidential election. Rashidat is the host of this show, and she has a YouTube show called Your Dream Strategist, where she uplifts Black women. She caters a lot towards Black women who are thinking of leaving the United States, people who are thinking of opting out of being this strong Black woman and this idea of Black excellence. And so we had a really great conversation about this notion of the glass cliff for Black women and talking about presidential candidate and current Vice President Kamala Harris. And it was just good times. So you can find her show at YouTube at Your Dream Strategist. And then this particular episode, if you want to watch the video of it, which I suggest that you do, is under her playlist, Quit Being a Strong Black Woman. It's exhausting. She's got a lot of great stuff. Also goes live on Fridays, and she's just good people, so check her out. But I hope you enjoy this episode. Here it goes.
Okay, so you guys, I am very excited about today because I want to talk about why is it always that Black women are called upon to be the ones that clean up the mess, only to be set up for failure. Like Kamala Harris's presidency, I believe is just the latest example of this bittersweet reality. We need her, and Black women have carried the weight for way too long. So her presidency shows how we're still in this cycle of being expected to be the strong ones in every crisis. So when do we just get to live and thrive? So today I'm here with Whitney Knox Lee from the Impostrix podcast so that we could talk about this from our perspective as Black women. Welcome, Whitney. I'm so excited to have you in this conversation. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. What do you think?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good. So let's start here. Controversy. Janet Jackson just said, oh, Kamala's not Black. How do you feel about that? Like, do you consider Kamala Harris Black?
Yes. I mean, I I don't love this about how we do each other.
Mm,
And in some respects, I get it. I get that, I've heard conversations about like Kamala Harris and her hair because she wears her hair straight, and that's not the kind of Black that I am, and comments like that. And okay, yeah, she's mixed. Okay. And
right.
I mean, I don't know why are she's being treated like a Black woman. I don't
Right.
know why we need to, I'm not going to distinguish
Right.
her. Like, she identifies, I think, as Black, and Asian. Admit, like, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not tripping. I'm not tripping.
I agree.
I think she's Black.
I agree. I think it's one of those conversations where I'm like, you guys, this is not the most important thing for us to be talking about. At the end of the day, if somebody put her in a lineup and somebody said, who is the Black person, they're going to pick out her. So why do we care? Like, at the end of the day, there's so many different reasons to support her. I'm in for it as well. So I'm with you on that. Okay. So
And
now
then,
that
and
we
then
go ahead.
I also just wanted to say about like Obama, because people were saying this about Obama, that he's not Black, that he's mixed. Okay, but have you seen him? Because for me, it's like when we're talking about Blackness and politics, what I'm concerned about their lived experience. So
Mm,
like, can they relate to me as a Black person? But I'm also concerned about how they are perceived by the voters.
mm-hmm.
Because if they're perceived as if they're Black, then for all intents and purposes, they Black.
Right.
Because it's the perception, it's the bias that we have that is going to be triggered if a voter thinks that you're Black. So I, she Black.
Right. She is. I agree. I agree. So, okay, so we got that established. So now, bringing this, I always like to bring things around to the conversation about how this affects the strong Black woman trope. We've talked about the glass, or, you and I in conversation have talked about the glass cliff theory, how it affects us in this push to like always be stepping in the context of crisis. So that's where we're going with this. So how does this election reflect on the historical pattern? And we don't have to get crazy deep into this, but like, because I'm not gonna say I know every bit of history. And so anybody that's watching this, please don't try to hold us to the fire. We're sharing our thoughts, our heart on this. But I want to talk about it, like, how does this reflect on the historical pattern of seeing us as Black women continue to step in to clean up the mess all the time?
Yeah, I told you I was going to do some research. I did not. So definitely what she said. This is just based on my experience as a Black woman and seeing other Black women um, who are called in exactly this to clean up the mess. And so, there have been several articles recently and studies done that talk about Black success, Black female success.
Mm,
And some of what underlies this story of, or this experience of Black women when we are elevated or promoted into positions of leadership or higher positions of leadership is this feeling of she'll take care of it.
mm,
Like, whatever it is that's going on, she'll handle it. It'll be all good. And so I've experienced this in my personal life. Where I have been kind of taken a leadership role, come to find out, like I may not have known up front all the stuff that was going on underneath the surface. But I've also seen it with people that I've worked under as who have been my directors
mm,
when they come into the organization. And, I don't know why that particular person was chosen. Like, I don't know what the public discussion around why that person is chosen is, but I'll say it is overwhelming and a bit disheartening to see when you want to celebrate this person. And of course, you're going to celebrate this person for their accomplishments because
mhm,
the fact is they are accomplished.
mhm,
Just because there's a mess happening doesn't mean that they don't deserve this position, that
mhm,
they can't handle the position or anything like that. But then we have to be the ones who are making it known how much of a mess everything is.
mhm,
We have to be the ones that are kind of carrying the weight of fixing all these other people's problems. And it's really easy for all of us, myself, like Black women included, it's really easy to dismiss other Black women because we all, suffer from this internalized white supremacy and Black inferiority. Um, so it's I myself have had feelings against other Black women directors, feeling some kind of way by how they're trying to clean up the organization, not understanding that they are cleaning up an organization.
mhm,
And so maybe a predecessor who was much more maybe relaxed in how they ran the organization
mhm,
or who did things differently in a way that I like. Now things are being changed. And what we see is that a Black woman is coming in and changing things.
mhm,
What we don't see is that a white woman left this organization or a white man left this organization with finances that are absolutely horrible, where we in debt, but we spending money like we're not.
mhm.
And, now there's somebody actually paying attention to the books and trying to understand what it is that the organization is doing. And so I think it's a setup. Like, I think it's unfortunate. And again, it makes me sad because the period of time in which we're celebrating the success of the Black women is so short
Mm,
because oftentimes if we are being elevated basically to fix a situation, the fixing of the situation isn't always a comfortable process for those around it.
Right. Right. And that all of that comes into this idea, this bittersweet, that we want to congratulate a Black woman for finally being put in the place that she should have always been, because if we would have done that a long time ago, the mess would not be like it is. We would be in such a better place. And yet she is given such an impossible task. And I did do a little bit of research. Let's call a couple people. So like Shirley Chisholm in 1968. Y'all, I'm looking at my notes. I don't have this all memorized. But she was the first Black woman elected to Congress. Chisholm had faced some of the challenges that many of her male counterparts did not, trying to get elected. But despite these obstacles and all of those things, she was still a trailblazer. So Shirley Chisholm, Fannie Lou Hamer was a civil rights leader in the 1960s. Uh, uh, Emma, no, Lord have mercy. Emmett Till's mother, a
Mm,
huge advocate, again, having to put in in the midst of trauma for her own son, and the things that were done to him, the mutilation that was done to him, having to stand up to be strong, and the bittersweet that we are so grateful that she did, and yet she should have never had to be in that position in the first place, and having to step in and put her feelings aside and yet be a part of this upheaval, this cry out, this passion to say, I know that I'm hurting, but if I don't say something, this will continue to happen, you know? And then,
mm,
Barbara Jordan in 1974 as a Black woman in the South serving in Congress. So there's so many examples. And I give these as like bigger examples because those are the popular ones. But as you said, Whitney, like we live this every
right.
single day, like every single day. This is not new to us. And I think that's why this conversation is so powerful. So when we connected and you're like, I think I want to go there, I was like, all right, sis, I'm with you. I'm with you. So I want to take it this way now. So why Black women are often led to, like, I'm curious, what would you say are the reasons why we're often expected to lead in the crisis? Like, yeah, y'all think y'all
Um,
got everything figured out anyway. Why all of a sudden you want to come to us now?
yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, and I'll speak on a smaller scale, like local level, talking about our own directors in the places that we work. I mean, I think subconsciously there is this feeling of less risk.
Mm,
If we check off the diversity box, right? We can do
mhm.
the diversity hire thing. But two, if everything goes to hell in a handbasket, it's not me. It's just like we tried to put a Black woman in charge. But this is what happened. Like I told y'all, but okay. So I think that there is some of that. I don't think people would admit it. Like, why would you admit something like that? But that's what it feels like,
Mhm.
to some extent, because, well, I'll just leave it there. That's what it feels like. But there's a couple of things that what you just said, um, that remind me of conversations that I've had in the past, with Dr. Fani Nagar, who is a neuroscientist, neuropsychologist here in Atlanta. What she studies is the impact of racial trauma on the brain,
Mm,
and specifically on the brain of Black women.
mm,
So she does this study with patients at Grady Memorial Hospital, which is here in Atlanta. Grady is the hospital in the city that serves everybody, like people that are on Medicaid or who don't have insurance, or
mm, mhm,
So as a result, the a lot of the people that come in, the women that come in, are Black women.
mhm,
So as a result, this study, has turned out to be a study on how racial trauma impacts the brain of Black women.
mm,
And what her and her team have found is, I'm gonna summarize. I've dumbed it down for myself, so I'm just gonna tell you the dumbed down version because I don't know the language. Basically, we're better at multitasking in areas where we are needing to manage risk and manage threat and still carry on with our lives. And
mm,
it's because when we see what we might perceive to be a threat or a potentially threatening situation specific to race, because this again is relating to racial trauma, our brains have adapted to be able to hold this threat and carry on with
Mm,
life.
mm,
When non-Black people are studied, they found that the reaction of like a white person's brain when they're seeing what could be a racial threat, they're completely focused on that racial threat. They're not able to then hold that and the other stuff that they got going on in their lives. And I find it really interesting because I think that is one of the characteristics that puts us in a position to be able to manage everybody's problems.
mm,
Because
mm,
not only like the country as like a potential president, or not only an executive director at an organization, but in our lives,
mhm,
our roles as Black women, many of us, we are caretakers. We do the business for the household. We do our finances. We do the grocery shopping. We prepare the food. We think every day about what our family is going to eat and then somehow miraculously provide them with the food. And all of this is going on at the same time that we are grieving the loss of somebody or something, that we are dealing with our own mental or physical health issues. Um, all of this is happening. Are you still there? Okay. All of this is happening while we have other real life, emotional, physical, spiritual things going on.
mhm,
And I think, I'm really interested in learning more about how we are impacted by generational trauma. But I think this is the generational trauma. Like, I think this is how we have adapted to this trauma. And so when you ask the question of like, why are we in this situation? Why are people coming to us for this thing? Like, I think one, people have come to Black women to fix things, forever. Here in these United States, like that's our, who was it? Gosh, I can't remember the book. Rest is Resistance, Trisha Hersey
mhm,
uses the language, and it's come up multiple times on my podcast about women being the mule
mhm,
of like society. Like we are the workers. We are here to extract labor from,
mhm,
period. And
mhm,
I think that societally that is still our role.
mhm, mhm. Girl, that takes me into a whole nother part of a conversation that I'm just gonna put that on my notepad and I'll come back to that later. I know something else that you talked about was the idea of the glass cliff theory. Would you explain like what that is and why you see that as being a part of this conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, my understanding of the glass cliff theory is that um, Black women, particularly, being elevated or promoted, basically for the purpose of then fixing some problem.
Mhm,
And that it's a type of, I don't know if sabotage is even the right word. It's a setup because when that happens, we're not necessarily given the resources that we need to be successful.
mhm,
Um, and we just live within this struggle of needing to do this job um, and needing to manage all of the things that are happening around us at the same time.
yeah.
So I think, for me, I I've seen and experienced how hard it is to be a Black woman who has been elevated into a position of leadership, and the backlash that can come from that,
Mhm,
even from people who don't mean to participate. Like I said, one of the things that I talk about a lot because as part of my role as a race equity consultant, like not even as part of my role, I am just very honest with myself about where I have gone wrong
mhm,
because I am not perfect. I also have fallen to have these kind of reactions
mhm,
in my own life. And so I had an executive director who told me that she felt as though I was treating her differently because she was a Black woman. And as I've explored that more with some of my mentors and colleagues and through the podcast, talk about like this idea that even as a Black woman, like my expectations of other Black women is high.
mhm,
like very high.
Mm-hmm.
And so the moment that you don't meet my expectation, then I start wagging my finger and talking all kind of ways. And, you know, I don't have those same high expectations for my white counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when we're talking about how are we going to support other people of color? How are we going to support Black people? How are we going to do DEI in this organization? How are we going to, I don't know, increase wages or all the things? Like, let's see what Kamala Harris does about raising the minimum wage. Because, like, the heart heaviness that I have, the fear and anxiety that I have around Kamala Harris is our collective ability to not hold her to a higher standard than anybody else um, who sits in the office of president.
Mm-hmm.
Because even with things of, her campaign platforms, points of like raising the middle class and raising minimum wage and doing things that statistically would greatly benefit folks of color, it's like, okay, well, if this doesn't happen, then what are we gonna feel about her and toward her? Because I've certainly done that, like when I didn't see things happening how I thought it should happen under my Black boss, I was critical.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would have been that critical if it were white people. So I have to constantly be checking myself. And I hope that folks listening think about for themselves. Like, we like to talk about how other people make Black women the mule, but we don't talk about how we ourselves, right? Like how we play into that, both as the mule, like we don't have the boundaries sometimes that we need to have, but also as the people that are very critical of the folks that look like us versus the folks that don't. Right. So that's one thing that came up. And I just wanted to share, you had talked about Shirley Chisholm and her experiences differing from the men. And I think the other really important thing here is that Black women deal with misogyny. So the combination of the misogyny because we are women and the racism because we are Black. And so everything that we are dealing with, and it's kind of why I think for me ties in too to why I'm not with Janet Jackson and talking about she ain't Black. That is misogyny. Trying to erase a whole part of her identity because she also has other aspects of her identity. Like, no, that's not, no.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the part that makes it hard for us to come together as a collective. It's the part that makes it hard for us to ever stop being on all the time, to ever stop expecting ourselves to be 10 times better than everything else. Like all of these things, even within ourselves, within our own culture, perpetuate this need to be this strong Black woman, this need to keep pushing, this need to keep proving ourselves. And so I so greatly appreciate the commentary where you say, I have to keep checking myself to say, I am going to show up and support this woman, and I'm not going to hold her to a fire that I would not hold other people to a fire to, because the unfair part is she is always going to go above and beyond, but it's never going to be enough if we don't check ourselves. And if we don't recognize that she's not a superwoman and that we should not be putting her on a platform of being a superwoman. She is leading us, but we still have to follow. We still have to participate. We still have to put action in to help her to accomplish, because we already know it's a setup. We already know it's a setup. So we have to be a part of helping make this successful, not just for her name, but because it is for all of us. It's for all of us. And the opportunity for us to create space, if we can create space for her to actually do something amazing like this and thrive, then that creates space for us to support each other, to do something big, something life-changing, but still have space to thrive without being bogged down by all of these pressures to be more, to do more, to constantly prove ourselves. And that's why, like, at the end of the day, I use the word bittersweet. Like, I really I'm glad that she's getting um she's getting elected, as far as that's what I'm bringing into the world. But
Yes,
like
absolutely.
that's it. Like, that's what I'm manifesting. I'm proud of that, and yet we also know how hard this is about to be. Like, that was my first thought when I heard that she was running, So I want to talk about that in the context of the pressure of strength. Like, we get this pressure all the time. Like, how do we feel like seeing this on such a huge platform? Like, how I would love for us to talk about how it makes us feel when we know that feels like it tends to roll down to the rest of us. Like, what comes up for
Mhm.
you?
Absolutely. I mean, when okay, so we heard the radio announcement, and it might even be, no, I saw it on TV. We were visiting an aunt in Tennessee. On the way back, we stopped by a hot chicken place, a Tennessee Nashville hot chicken place. They had a TV on the news. It was on mute, so I was reading um, that Joe Biden had stepped down and had endorsed Kamala Harris. And I just remember feeling like a pit in my stomach.
Mm,
The first thing my husband said to me, a black man from the South, is, she's not going to win.
mm,
And I think those two combined feelings,
mm,
a lot of people that I've spoken to had those feelings. Now, I've also spoken to people who met it with just straight excitement. That was not me.
mm-hmm,
I was terrified.
mm-hmm,
Not only terrified and exhausted for her,
mm-hmm,
terrified for myself as a black woman
mm-hmm,
who is now like, my likeness is now in everybody's face
mm-hmm,
as this candidate against this dude that is straight vile,
mm-hmm,
who has control of half of the country
mm-hmm,
around what he says. I mean, he can inspire whole insurrections on the nation's capital, right? So, like, he has a lot of power. I'm not going to downplay Donald Trump's power
mm-hmm,
because he has a lot of power. And I live in the South.
mm-hmm,
And so just the fear of what is her running for president going to mean for me
mm-hmm,
and my community.
yeah.
Um, so that was a thing for my husband. I'm just gonna call it what it is. It's the massage noir. Like, it's a black woman can't run for president. Or I can't be president. She can run for president, can't be president. Like, within our own, like, that's just, I black men in particular, I think, feel that way. So that's a thing. He's still gonna vote for her, but anyways, so for me, like, that was my first reaction. And the following weeks, I had multiple conversations with other black women who held that same anxiety of, like, cautiously excited, maybe
Mm,
proud, getting on the phone calls to raise the money. She raised $81 million in small donations in the first 24 hours. Like, that was black folk, black women,
come on. Mm-hmm.
who are excited, even though we may feel some anxiety at the same time. We also know it's going to take a lot. Like, it's going to take a lot just to keep her morale up. Like, we're not even talking about the physical aspect of running a presidential campaign
Yeah.
or the demands of the job, but just getting her from point A to point, waking her up in the morning, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I hold a lot of anxiety still about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I called my mom. She's one of the people that was just excited.
Mm,
And for me, she was trying to back me off the ledge a little bit. Like, don't go into doomsday about this. Like, just be happy that we have a black woman running for president. And so I've been trying to channel my mom because, like, I am somebody that I'm always thinking about race and the impact that it's going to have. Um, so yeah, I don't even remember what the question was. I just remember like feeling this feeling, and yeah, we're seeing it play out.
Yeah. And I can say I had a similar feeling. I was like, I kind of saw this coming. And the other thing that I thought to myself was, I don't know if they had it planned out this way, but I also had the thought, I don't know that America would have accepted her had she just from the get-go been the candidate of choice. I kind of, it's sad to say this, but it was like the Democratic Party had to prove that Joe Biden, like he had to get up there and epically fail for everyone to say, "Oh my gosh, he can't do this." For them to be like, okay, I can now make the mental space that she has to step up. Because if she would have just stepped up in the first place, there always would have been like, well, why didn't Joe just do it? Why is it her? Da, 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 da. Like it would have always been that little Canada in the back of most of America's minds. So I pretty much feel like they had to put him up there and he had to fall flat on his face for this to happen. Now that means that it put her in a bad way because she had to then fundraise faster. She had to make up the gap. She had to make up the gap. And while I'm sad about that, I don't know that it would have worked any other way. I do believe that she is going to be our next president. And I hold that same anxiety, and I also I want to be like Inside Out where I can have space where I hold joy and like this hope on one side, but I'm also holding my anxiety, my disgust of the situation, but also my sadness, all in this same ball of emotions that at the end of the day, more than anything, my Black joy, every time I see that woman take a picture and it's like full on laughing, that helps me. That helps
Yeah,
me hold on to the hope. That helps me hold on to, no, she's not going to be able to fix everything, but this is history in the making, and I have to be present in the fact that I get to be a part of it if I choose to allow myself to really be present in it. And so
yeah.
I know that the strength is happening, and yet again that bittersweet where I'm making space for it.
Well, and to your point, I think that's a really interesting point about like, did we need to see Joe Biden completely fizzle out? You know, maybe we did, but remember, like, she lost to him
Mm,
in her first run for president. So, like, America has already made their decision about who they would prefer. And so, even, you know, had Joe Biden not done this, and if she would have just ran from the get go for the next president, you know, it does beg the question of what will we have voted for her?
mm-hmm.
Because let's be honest, we didn't really have a choice at some point. Like I know there's some clarification that I think now has happened around the process. Like at when it first happened, there was a lot of anger um, about the democratic process, saying that how Kamala Harris became the nominee was non-democratic, when in fact she was the presumptive nominee.
Mm.
And then they actually did follow through with doing the vote with the Democratic National Convention. But I do think that the point remains that, you know, we what were we going to do as voters when, like, in 4 or 5 months we know the orange man is running for president? So like what else are we going to do, right?
Yep.
And so maybe this was the way that it needed to happen if it was going to happen.
Right. 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 And that's both like, again, a lot of emotions can come up with it being that way, you know? So, okay, coming back to this idea that we again, now to us, we have seen how many times it's like, again, the other has crapped out, and so we don't have, that's it, like there's nobody else, like we have to step up. And it's just a very interesting mirror on such a huge scale of what Black women deal with every single day. And I think that's why this conversation is so timely and so important. So I mean, I think, and you started to touch on this, like how how do we how do we expect her to actually make space for mental health, for emotional health, for physical health, while trying to be in this position when we know how hard it is in our positions? Like, wow, 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 wow.
Girl, look, you asking the wrong person because I'm here now sick because I can't take care of myself. I be working too dang much. I be doing, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the answer to this because it is internal as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, for as much as I love to tell people take rest, take your break, do your little exercise or whatever, go dance. I don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, it is going to be more about how I communicate with other people about my expectations
Mm-hmm.
for her in this role as president.
Yeah.
And like openly showing grace.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things that I can't negotiate on, like I don't support our role in Palestine right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, there are things that I I don't love racial capitalism. We
Mm-hmm.
are a racially capitalist, state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Kamala ain't changing that.
Right.
So like also just being aware that I cannot like American policy, American global policy. I cannot like how we are showing up in some of these forums and on the world stage. And I can like some of how we're showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I can like how, if she raises the minimum wage, I can like that, but just like allowing her humanity
Mm-hmm.
instead of viewing her as the mule who's just, you failed at getting this one job done. You're no
Right.
good.
Right. Right. I agree. And that's my practice. That's my same sentiment is, and I'm trying to do this on my daily, like having grace for Black women that I meet and interact with on a daily basis, knowing that we have all experienced a collective trauma, and then extending that to her as someone who has stepped into the vice president role and will be stepping into the presidential role, understanding that some things are going to be better and some things are not going to change, and some things might even get a little worse. And yet, I know that one, the alternative would make all of it worse. But not even just in the context of that, just keeping it straight to her that I know her heart is going to be to make things better. And I do believe that things will get better. And yet I still have to participate, and I yet still have to hold grace. And so holding grace, and all of the things that you said, I think you summed it up so well. And I think on a personal level, holding grace for myself and uh, stop bulldozing myself to do 10 times more, to prove myself and everything, to relinquish my humanity for the sake of this position or whatever it is I'm doing, because we're in so many different aspects, and all of these different aspects, and figuring out what it looks like, how I want to thrive within that, which are topics that you're right, I don't have all the answers for either, and yet I want to keep asking the question. I want to keep talking to others. I want to keep if I could get 1% better at that every day, I am helping take back my reparations just as much as she's doing as much as she can from her side. Because reparations, we have to be a part of taking that as well. We're going to have to take it. They're not just going to give it to us, friends. They're not just going to give it to us. We have to start taking it. And like Trisha Hershey said, our rest is our resistance. Our rest is also our reparation. So choosing that and finding spaces and making space for her to choose that and manifest that as well. So I want to connect that to, like, I know generally my listeners are like this, we're in this transition of I want to quit being a strong Black woman and make space to have what I like to call a soft life, mainly because it's like the trendy topic. But I also want to just say it's also just, it's not about just the nails. It's about literally improving our quality of life as Black women. So when you think about that, like, what are the top 3 things that you're like, this is what I want this improvement of my quality of life to look like?
Yeah, the first thing that I'll say is opting out of taking responsibility for other people's feelings.
Mm.
And that, for me, very concretely looks like I will be taking off the day of the election and the day after, and possibly the day before. Because one, part of my role is to go into workplaces and talk about this stuff, and I don't want to. I just don't want to. I'm not. You can't pay me enough to hold whatever I'm going to be holding then, and
Try to juggle
somebody else's stuff. Like,
yeah.
So that's one thing. The second thing is releasing a little bit. So for my business, I've now hired a virtual assistant, and am working on delegating. Yeah. I have very unhealthy, very unsustainable work ethic habits. And have multiple projects going on. I could literally just work 24 hours a day. So, and I get sick when I do that. So right now, working on like delegating tasks, asking for help, but also allowing more grace for myself. So, for example, I've got some internal deadlines that I set for myself, relating to selling a physical product and wanting that to be available in time for holiday shopping. I don't know if it's going to happen. And it's just going to have to be okay because I have like external deadlines, with clients that I'm going to have to prioritize. That's just how business works sometimes. And normally I would be like, well, guess I'm staying up until 2 a.m. every day to finish, the project for myself. But now I'm just being like, I'm probably going to have to schedule it on my calendar for like a week and a half from today and do it during the day. I edited my podcast for the first time during the day yesterday. Out of 3 seasons, I have never done podcast work during the day, besides interviewing. So like stuff like that, like I have to have better boundaries with myself about when I'm working, and just loosen up.
Yeah.
And all of that, like I said, like all of that is internal. Ain't none of that reliant on anybody.
Right.
So like for me, if I'm thinking about this being part of the soft life, which I hadn't before, so that's interesting. I like that. Like it's all reliant and dependent on me.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And especially as Black women, because a lot of us see entrepreneurship as a pathway to freedom, I have to say it's a pathway to autonomy and some freedom, but it's also a pathway to a lot of work. And so we have to choose it. Like we literally have to choose it. And that's why I started Freedom Fridays, because Freedom Fridays was what I needed. I needed to sit my tail down for an hour and really look at what do my priorities for the next week need to be, so that I could put them in place, but then I could also prioritize rest and fun. Because if I just had to get into this habit of deciding it as I go, I was going to keep deciding to get the work done because that's what I've always done. that's how I've always managed. That's part of that being strong, always showing up 10 times uh, bigger, longer, harder than everybody else. And if I wanted to intentionally change that, I needed a practice that was going to help me do that, which is exactly why I have Freedom Friday. So, yes, this is, yeah, when I think about this idea of the soft life, it's all around this concept of how do I, improve my quality of life. And now let's bring into another aspect of that, the burden of representation, because then we're like, but we represented all of us. Why can't we be individuals at any space? Like, why is there no space for us to fail, to be human? And it's not even so much about failure. It's just about being human. Like, we don't get a lot of space to be human. And I'm like, I want to make space to take that off as well. So I think even as a business owner, I was so grateful. Whitney and I tried to set up this interview, and girl, y'all, let me tell you, I had brain farts galore, and I was so grateful that Whitney had grace and still wanted to do this interview, because I wasn't my mindset needed a reset. I had too many things going on. So I'm saying that as bringing that same context of grace, for our future president into ourselves and into our burden of representation. So I'm curious, like, what does that bring up for you?
Well, for me, I don't want people to hear lack of accountability, because
Mhm.
that's not what we're talking about.
We don't even know how to do that.
Right. Like, both for ourselves and for others. We do, I firmly believe in accountability, but with accountability means, for me, transparency, and it means
Mhm.
communication. So even like, one of the reasons it was so easy just to, like, it wasn't even a big deal with you and me trying to figure out what we were doing, was because you were like, I can't remember what we're doing. Why are we talking tomorrow? And that lets me know, like, you're not trying to fake it till you make it. You're not fronting. You're not, gonna show up and just talk about what you think we talking about without me being on the same page. Like, and for me, that helps with accountability, because
Mhm.
then it's like, okay, one, she knows that we're meeting tomorrow. She just doesn't remember why or what we're talking about, which is fine, because clearly we weren't clear, you know? And so now we can say, okay, you know what? Let's still meet tomorrow, but tomorrow we'll figure out what we're talking about for,
Mhm.
this episode. Which may just be easier anyways, because we can talk instead of emailing,
Mhm.
right? And so I just feel like we can still be accountable and hold others accountable and allow grace and allow humanity. What for me, accountability with deadlines, for example, that does mean still having deadlines, having goals, but also acknowledging that stuff comes up. People
Mhm.
get sick. My kids got sick, then my husband got sick, and now I'm sick. Like, there's just things that are going to happen that we have no control over. And how do I want to spend my energy?
Mhm.
Do I want to spend my energy like all tight and, upset because something? Or can I just let that go and reset?
Yeah.
Schedule it for the next week. If it's a client situation, fine. Like, that means me communicating with them. I'm sorry. I know that I said I was going to have this ready by this time, but this thing came up and I'm not. And I think people appreciate that from us,
Mhm.
because, for me, one of my traits that I have worked really hard to correct was that, like, if I couldn't give you what I thought you wanted, then I just like disappear. I'd
Mhm.
just be ghosting people. I'd just be like, well, hopefully they forgot. I'll email them when it's ready. But until then, I'm not going to say nothing, and that's not a good look.
Mhm.
How are
Mhm.
we going to work together if that's what it's going to be?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I would say to that, around like the humanity of it, is that we can have both grace and hold ourselves and other people accountable. And that doesn't have to be, it's not a threat. Being accountable, or saying, talking about how you will hold your partner in this work accountable, is not a threat. It's just a way of understanding the parameters and how you're going to work together or do the thing.
Yeah. And I appreciate that so much, again, because we can't we can't, when we make holding space for each other to be black and white, we really take away the beauty of uh the magic that happens in the gray. Like there's magical things. I was, even as we're recording, I'm like, dang, enjoying this conversation. This is gonna be a good one. I'm like, I hope everybody damn, this is good. This is good. Making space for that wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have had this space to hold grace and allow magical things to happen. Like, I think there's so much beauty in that if we allow it to happen. And I think it helps us to reclaim our rest, to reclaim our joy. Like, it's so much, it takes away so much of the complication of it. And so, like, with that in mind, like, what are things that you like to do to, again, especially as a Black woman, as an entrepreneur, knowing all of the pressures that we have, like, what are ways that you like to tangibly reclaim your rest and reclaim your joy?
Yeah, so this is super bougie, but my husband and I a couple years ago splurged after getting our tax return check on an adjustable bed.
Mm.
And when I tell you, and a lot of people choose not to make this lifestyle choice, but my husband can't live without TV. So we have a TV in our room.
Uh-huh.
So one of my favorite things to do is to get in that bed,
Mm-hmm.
snuggle up,
Mm-hmm.
have some tea or some coffee or cake, and watch TV in
Mm-hmm.
a like fancy position, you know?
Uh-huh.
Like, it's never great to be in a hospital, but the best part about hospitals are the beds. You know, when you can adjust.
I love that. I love it. And I'm sure, I'm thinking like a sleep number bed that's got like a little warm into it. Girl,
I
I'm
wish
like,
they could.
girl.
Yeah, I wish. We tried. We were our tax refund wasn't that big. It wasn't that big. So it's just your basic. It goes, the head goes up and the feet go up, but the warmer or the soft and that would be so nice. One day in my soft life, I will
Yes.
have it'll have warmers on either side. It'll now like the tilt. They have like the pillow tilt, so the top
Mm.
tilts up, but then there's another piece that tilts too, so
Wow.
that you could rest your pillow. Yeah,
I mean, that
yeah.
you're right. That's bougie. That's listen. All you need is an electric blanket. Forget the warmers. You good. Like, this bed is bougie. Like, I'm not mad at this. I'm mad
Yeah,
at this is
yeah.
all.
When I be having my little cramps and whatnot, I got my little heat pads that I put on me, and I just be snuggling. So, um, this this weekend, I took the whole weekend off, which it's ridiculous that that's something that I have to say out loud. But I know for many people that are listening, we don't actually take weekends off. We
Mm-hmm.
will be working at some point during the weekend.
Yeah.
So I took the entire weekend off. I took Monday off because it was my birthday, and
Oh
I was just in bed. I'm a
yeah.
Libra. Hmm. Yep. So I was just in bed watching the Great British Bake Off um, with my tea. You know, for me, that is like bliss. If my kids are in a good mood, I don't mind having them there, but I'm also very happy without them there.
I love it.
It's simple. It's simple.
I love it. And you bring up a great point. Like, sometimes we have to, especially again, I think corporate America women experience it, but I think especially anybody that's doing a side hustle plus being an entrepreneur, one of the first things that I had to do to really reclaim my rest and my joy was to take my mindset off of living my life that same corporate mindset way, because I knew that my rest and joy moments were going to have to be sprinkled in throughout the day. I couldn't just say my rest and joy moments are Friday from 5 p.m. to Monday morning at 7 a.m. Like, it couldn't be just those hours. I had to get a lot better at finding ways to bring joy and rest throughout my week, throughout the day, and damn near scheduling it. Because if it ain't on my schedule, it ain't real. It's not going to get done. It's just not.
Mhm.
And then when it comes to that time when I've scheduled it, like actually pausing and doing the thing that does give me rest, that does give me joy so that I can actually receive it. So yes, I'm with you. And I like to have certain things like, I mean, I don't have a head raised bed, but trust me, I got the electric blanket and it is around and it's starting to get crisp now because I'm a 90 degrees and a breeze girly. I'm not about this cold life. So
Mhm.
I'm quick to pull out the electric blanket at this time of year. It's like right up my alley. And finding like being intentional and finding those different things of joy. So yes, again, we talk about that in Freedom Fridays or every Friday as well. So okay, I would like to say as we bridge this, this has been such a great conversation. And I think that the reason, and I love that you brought it up, I want to say the biggest thing that I think it empowers is that it gives us the space to ask the question and find healing and fight for the freedom and also recognize how we can be a part of helping Kamala fight and make space for it for us as well. So all of this without martyring ourselves. Because what happens is we've never stopped being the person who will show up for the fight.
Right.
But if nobody else is showing up for the fight, then we're the martyrs. And I know we're tired of that. So I'm glad we're talking about what it looks like to be a part of it without having to do that. What would you say was like the most important thing that you want people to get out of this conversation?
I do think that it's the grace for ourselves and for President Harris.
Come
Um,
on.
because we just can't like and when I say that I mean like to encompass our anxiety too. Like,
Mm,
okay, some of us have some anxiety, some fear about this. Our lives are going to be impacted in very different ways. Some of us might actually experience increased levels of racism,
hmm
or increased levels of harm because Trump said something, and so his little follower found me and did something. Like, stuff might actually happen. And I do agree with my mom that we cannot live in that fear 100% of the time. And
hmm
so allow ourselves some room to have hope, some room to have some excitement, and then figuring out how we are going to communicate the grace that we're giving her and
hmm
ourselves to other people so
Yeah.
that we can spread it. Because, like,
Yeah.
I'm one person and that's pretty cool, but like, we need more than one person to feel this way about the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I so agreed. Because, I mean, here's the other thing. If we don't do that, like, what happens? Like, we continue to perpetuate the harmful stereotypes. We continue to undermine the progress for Black women. We continue to undermine blocking or to perpetuate blocking these pathways where we actually get
Mhm.
to softness and joy. We continue stalling cultural and systemic change. Like, we continue all of these things if we don't do that, you know? But I think having conversations like this, like, allow us to bring this conversation to the forefront so we can intentional and be thoughtful about how we do it rather than accidentally making more trouble. And sometimes it happens, it's real, but hopefully this helps us not continue to do that by accident, but to be intentional about what we do going forward. So Whitney, tell everybody, like, what are your platforms? How can people continue to conversate, hear your commentary, participate with you and all the different things?
Right, yeah. So you can find me on YouTube at Impostrix Podcast. My podcast started as an audio podcast, but now we also have the video component. So you can also listen to audio on any of your podcast players. And then I'm on Instagram at Impostrix Podcast. I also, on my other business, share information about estate planning and Black folks getting their affairs in order.
Come on.
So feel free to follow me on Instagram at Wills for the People, which is the name of my company.
I love it. I love it. Wills for the people, yes, because we need that so that we can keep our property in our families as well. That's a whole nother topic. We need to talk about that. We already got another one scheduled, y'all, but we're gonna have to add on to that too. So
Thank
and
you
then
so much for having me.
yeah, so glad that you're here. This is not the end. This is just the beginning, y'all. I love it so much. I mean, because these are the topics that I like to talk about. If you haven't met me before, I am Rashidat, your dream strategist, and I'm all about helping us take this journey from quit being a strong Black woman to actually figuring out and creating a life, a soft life. Not because we're trying to just be in our nails and be like bougie babes all the time. No, like this is about improving our quality of life no matter where we are and the things that we do. And so much of it starts internally, but then what we fix internally becomes an expression in our life. And that's what makes it so beautiful. So topics like the one that you got today with Whitney and I, and then also fun topics like travel and eating good food and going dancing. Listen, I like to talk about all of those things as well. So if that interests you, make sure you take a second to subscribe and share this with another Black woman who would enjoy this conversation, who you've already talked to and you know is like pondering these different things. Make sure you all subscribe and join us and share your thoughts in the comments. It's been so good. Again, Whitney, thank you so much for doing this. I already told you to like 4 times on the call, but this has been a great conversation and I look forward to doing it
Thank
again.
you. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, you guys, have a good day. Thanks for watching.